Tonight, still dealing with the fallout 3 days after a snowstorm blanketed the GTA.
It's frustrating because these streets should be cleared.
Yeah, getting over the snowbanks can be a little challenging.
Safety concerns from pedestrians and frustration from shop owners as the city works to get all streets and sidewalks cleared in the aftermath of last week's massive storm. Plus,
to have this threat looming over my head of being evicted, I'm at my wit's end.
this woman is now facing eviction after she complained to CBC Toronto about the living conditions in her building. Her landlord claiming her accusations are untrue. And
I love the city, I love the community, I love every neighborhood and how each neighborhood has its own personality.
a big celebration is in order as Toronto turns 189 years old. The city kicking off 12 days of festivities tonight with music, food, and all things that make Toronto great. Good evening, I'm Kelda Yoon. 3 days after a winter storm blanketed the GTA with massive amounts of snow, much of it is still with us. And it's becoming a cause of frustration among some people in Toronto. As Chris Glover reports, the city is pleading for patience as it works to clear all that's left behind.
The aftermath of the biggest single snow dump of the season, still a hassle for some businesses.
All of our customers walk up and down the downpours, so getting over the snowbanks can be a little challenging.
It's also a safety issue.
He was just walking across the street and just right here, and trying to get this was completely uncleared.
Gail Rebick's 74-year-old father, Alvin, fell on an uncleared sidewalk yesterday. She says even the paramedics had trouble navigating around the snow. He's already undergone one surgery on his fractured ankle and will need another.
Had no issue with mobility, and now they're not sure what's going to be the case with his walking going forward.
I'm so sorry. How are you feeling just even having to say that?
It's terrible. I mean, it's frustrating because these streets should be cleared. So a man should be able to walk his dog without fear of falling. And of course, I'm worried about him.
What does all of this say to you about the city's response to the snow that we had?
Well, it was terrible. I mean, it was over 24 hours.
Overnight Friday into Saturday, roughly 30 centimeters of snow fell. On Saturday, the city declared a major snowstorm condition and 1,100 salting and plowing machines got to work. By Monday morning's commute, especially on major routes, things were moving.
Crews have been working around the clock all weekend long. I'm pleased to share that plowing operations are now substantially complete, and now we're working on cleanup.
That cleanup work includes going back over areas that were missed or done poorly, like this strip along St. Clair West. On social media, people posted that they took it upon themselves to clear dozens of streetcar stops in the downtown. The city said transit stops and bike lanes would be their top priorities today, while shifting into a next phase.
Beginning tonight, we will be now participating in active snow removal.
All of the snow that's being physically removed from city streets will end up at one of 4 dump sites, like the location I'm standing at right now, basically empty, but ultimately will be filled with much more snow. Parking is currently prohibited on posted snow routes, including all streetcar lines.
I am really happy that they're being proactive and getting rid of some of the snow because it just gets so mucky and slushy and cumbersome.
And the 72-hour parking ban can be extended, so especially in the days ahead, but maybe always, watch your parking.
We will continue to check in as we make that progress. But, I'm hopeful that we'll get it all done this week. That's the hope.
So that is certainly the hope, but the head of Transportation Services says the parking ban will remain in effect until all of the work is completed. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
Let's go to Colette Kennedy now with a first check on your forecast. And Colette, quite a bit of cleanup still to be done. It was quite the blast of winter we got on Friday.
Well, certainly over the weekend, Kelda, we had those milder temperatures, and that allowed some of the mess from Friday night to be melting. But then even at night with the cooler temps, refreezing. So it does make things kind of refreeze and start to build up, even though we've been doing some clearing or everyone doing their best. But when you have a temperature like 7 degrees, boy, that takes care of, well, it was more of a mix anyway in southwestern Ontario, but kind of anything that's left around. But that was early in the day. That was around the lunch hour, and then the temperature temperature falling as that system was moving in. Daytime high of 3 degrees for Toronto. And that system still through the overnight hours, a few flurries possible. Some of those may tag into the GTA, but it's not much more than that, roughly about a trace. Now, a few spots could pick up a few centimeters, but that's more going to be into southwestern Ontario. And then we get into that sunshine tomorrow, which will feel good, except, and the exceptions are the winds. So it will feel like -10 early tomorrow morning, and it is going to be quite breezy through the day tomorrow. So if you get out of the sun and into the shade, I think you're going to feel it.
Thanks so much, Colette. A Mississauga woman has been hit with an eviction notice after complaining publicly about her apartment building. And she was one of several tenants who spoke to CBC Toronto last fall about the living conditions. Well, now she fears speaking up may end up costing her her home. Ryan Patrick Jones has the details.
Garbage piling up outside, mice and roaches inside units, and routine repairs left undone for months. These are some of the complaints April Johnston detailed when she and other tenants spoke to us last October about the state of this Mississauga apartment complex. But in documents filed with the Ontario Landlord and Tenant Board in December, a paralegal for the complex's owner, Toronto-based Salmore Builders, says the accusations were untrue. The documents claimed the complaints hindered, quote, the landlord's reasonable enjoyment of the residential complex, and that all maintenance requests Johnson submitted had been dealt with in a timely manner.
Nobody deserves to.
2 weeks ago, Johnson was told the owner had applied to evict her.
I'm beyond frustrated, and I'm right now terrified of losing my housing. With the way the housing market is right now, to have this threat looming over my head of being evicted, I'm at my wit's end. I'm frustrated and I'm fed up.
On a visit last Tuesday, 2 tenants who declined to be identified showed us what they call shoddy repairs. One says she's been bathing from a bucket for months due to plumbing issues, while Johnston says she continues to find mice in her apartment.
Up until February 8th, I was still writing letters to have the garbage cleaned up around the property. Tenants are still looking for repairs to be done. Plumbing is still a big issue around here.
The building owner's paralegal wouldn't comment while the case is being adjudicated. This paralegal, who isn't involved in the case, says a landlord is unlikely to win eviction based on a tenant going public with their complaints about poor maintenance.
Well, I've seen a case, 1 or 2 cases before where landlords have brought this type of application, but on each case I've seen, the application has been dismissed.
Johnston hopes that's the case. A date hasn't yet been set for the eviction hearing. Ryan Patrick Jones, CBC News, Toronto.
Police have identified the man who was fatally stabbed while walking along Queen Street early this morning as 55-year-old Jeffrey Monroe of Toronto. As Greg Ross reports, police are now looking for a group of 4 men who they believe may have known him.
It happened just before 1 o'clock this morning. Police say a man was attacked and stabbed in the intersection of Queen Street East and Sherbourne.
There appears to be a conflict that is taking place on the street here, just behind me. There is an attack on one individual. That individual collapses, and 3 suspects flee the scene, heading eastbound on Queen Street East from Sherbourne Street.
The motive behind the stabbing is still unclear, but police say it doesn't appear to be a random attack.
There's a possibility they might be acquaintances of each other, or the group of persons who frequent this area.
Residents we spoke to today say this kind of violence is nothing new here.
This is one of the more dangerous corners in the area, and all kinds of shootings and stabbings.
Absolutely not. That's a regular occurrence around here. Like, I mean, it happens pretty much almost every day.
Police are now reviewing security footage from multiple businesses in the area, trying to identify suspects and determine what happened in the moments before this man was stabbed. This is security footage recorded around the time of the attack from a nearby restaurant. At one point, a man who is alone can be seen walking westbound on Queen Street. He passes 2 other people before walking out of frame. Those 2 people then turn to watch something that is happening out of the frame. Eventually, 3 more men then join them, and they all walk away together. Police have not confirmed if these are the suspects, but they are looking at this video and others.
Yeah, we certainly are hopeful. camera footage is a huge part of our investigations these days, and we'll cross our fingers.
Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
One person is dead after a house fire in Oshawa this morning. The fire has been deemed suspicious, and Durham police are now helping in the investigation.
On 2 levels, there was fire and evidence of fire on 2 locations at least. And sometimes the fires just migrate and create through the voids fires on their own. So we have to do a complete investigation.
It happened near King Street East just before 10 a.m. 4 fire trucks responded to the blaze. Oshawa Fire says they were able to extinguish the fire quickly. Toronto's Deputy Mayor Jennifer McKelvey is requesting help from the federal and provincial governments as each prepare to lay out their 2023 budgets. The request follows previous similar asks from former Mayor John Tory to help with the city's finances. Provincial opposition leader Marit Stiles says the province should do more to bail out municipalities.
All you have to do is look at, what's happening here in Toronto, but in cities across this province, you see the services that are in decline because this government has actually eliminated, for example, development charges, the means by which municipalities can actually improve services to their communities. The government needs to come forward, and we do absolutely need a new deal for cities.
McKelvey wrote a letter to Ontario Finance Minister Peter Bethlen-Falvey and Federal Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland. She's looking for $658 million from the federal government and more than $523 million from the province to deal with what she calls a pandemic hangover. The deputy mayor says big cities need a new fiscal framework to stay sustainable through future pandemics and other global challenges. Ontario's top court has ruled against Premier Doug Ford's government, striking down election advertising rules, calling them unconstitutional. But as Lorenda Redicott reports, the government plans to appeal again.
Everybody gets a tax cut. You get a tax cut. You get a tax cut. The government's rules affected ads like this one by organizations or unions ahead of an election.
Your deep cuts to healthcare are making things worse.
Before 2021, these third parties could spend up to $600,000 in the 6-month lead up to an election. Then the government stretched that pre-election time to a year with no spending increase. Doug Ford and his government even used the notwithstanding clause to keep it in place after another court ruling found it violated free speech. This appeal court decision found the advertising limits affects voters' meaningful participation in the electoral process.
We're really pleased that the Court of Appeal recognized that these restrictions do have an impact on voters' access to information in the lead up to an election, and that the government really hadn't provided any sort of justification for why it was necessary.
Never feels good to lose.
Finance Minister Peter Bethlen-Falvey responded for the government.
I haven't had a chance to review it, nor has our government had a chance to review it, but obviously we're going to review it and look at our options.
Late this afternoon, the spokesperson for the Attorney General said the government is disappointed and will be appealing to the Supreme Court of Canada.
It's just yet another example of how wrong this government is getting it. When they trample on the democratic rights of Ontarians, they're going to lose, and they're going to lose again and again. And it's time they got the message and stopped wasting millions of dollars that could be spent elsewhere fighting in the courts.
I just want to say to the Premier, you know what? Follow the law. Stop wasting our tax dollars on court cases that you continually lose over and over again.
The appeal court judges are giving the government 1 year to create new legislation. Lorenda Reddick.
Welcome back. You will soon see more cyclists on College Street. Construction starts this week in the area to build elevated bike lanes from Little Italy to downtown. Ali Chiasson has the details.
The bike lane will actually be from the sidewalk curb, which is just below the snow pile, all the way out to the white edge of the existing bike lane.
Pretty soon, a good chunk of College Street will become a cycling corridor. Similar to what we've seen along Bloor Street, College will feature elevated bike lanes.
This is going to solve a really key issue, which is that as the snow piles up closer to the sidewalk curb, people start to park in the bike lane, and you can see it really closely over there.
The new infrastructure will span between Manning Avenue and Little Italy all the way to Bay Street.
So from Manning to Spadina, they'll be raised at a similar elevation to the sidewalk. And between Spadina and Bay, they'll be protected by a concrete curb.
This should help alleviate the tight squeeze between cars and bikes that exist currently along that route, where cars all too often end up in bike lanes.
Cyclists will tell you that just having painted lines on the road barely protects anyone from cars or the car doors from hitting you. So to them, having elevated bike lanes is the way to go. And the city councilor for this area is a cyclist herself, so you know she's all for it.
Oh, it's about time.
Councillor Diane Sachs is of the mind, if you build it, they will come.
There's a huge unmet demand to cycle, but people won't cycle unless it's safe.
But a project like this has to include all road users. So while this means we lose a lane of traffic along College, space will be made to allow for some on-street parking, like what we've got on Bloor.
We often find when we install protected bike lanes, we see collisions go down for all users. And so this is really just another project in the multitude of projects the city is leading to align with City Council direction to improve conditions on the road for everybody and to lessen our impact on the climate.
Commuters can expect lane reductions and business owners can expect construction equipment in front of their shop for a period of time. The city says they're first digging up sections in Little Italy to get that infrastructure installed before the construction impacts patio season. It's expected to wrap before the summer. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
The city of Toronto is marking its 189th birthday today, and it's doing it in style with a big celebration concert at Nathan Phillips Square tonight. But that's not all. The event just a kickoff to 12 days of festivities across the city. Dale Manukduk was at tonight's event speaking to residents about what the city means to them.
The little word in French, I love you, je t'aime Toronto.
Hundreds of people wishing the city well on its 189th birthday. And while we often tend to complain about what's wrong with the city, these residents all agree on what they love most about it.
It's the diversity that's a multicultural city.
Everything is so different from each other. You know, every neighborhood has some vibe.
That's what Celebrate Toronto, a not-for-profit that organized the birthday bash, hopes to emphasize.
I think people need to be more thankful for where they are and what the city can offer them. You know, it's easy to kind of focus on negative things at times, but there's a lot of greatness and a lot of good.
So what makes this city great? Well, for one, the food.
We are the only business selling Colombian obleas dessert. It comes with wafer, a caramel milk, cheese.
I got an all-natural tropical flavored hot sauce. It's called Tunup hot sauce. Tunup is a Jamaican slang, so it stands for it's just that good, it's amazing.
Spot on, it's hot,
awesome.
It's delicious,
thank you,
and it's not overpowering.
In addition to the 40-plus vendors and food trucks, Toronto's diverse musical talent was on display, from rock and roll choirs to steel drums. The many different artists the city offers up is something MC and former Much Music VJ Rick Campanelli knows all about.
As a Much Music VJ, I would go see 1-2 shows, live shows every night. I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. I was the luckiest kid coming from Hamilton to see a show at the Rivoli, at the Horseshoe, all these amazing venues.
And organizers are activating some of those venues over the next 12 days with a variety of shows planned, including at the historic Silver Dollar Room, all in the name of showcasing the best Toronto has to offer. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
Let's go back to Colette now. And Colette, I have my fingers crossed for no big storms this week.
Yeah, thanks, Kelda. As we kind of look ahead, I know the question on many folks' minds, when's the next big event, or do we have another one in the forecast? Well, you can breathe a bit of a sigh of relief if you are looking for a bit of a breather here in between systems, because we do have that weak one that's just passing through tonight. It's mostly some light flurries, a dusting to a few centimeters, and then we get into sunshine tomorrow. WC, that's the wind chill. You're going to feel that tomorrow. It will feel cool because it will be breezy, even though we have the sun. Then we have kind of quieter conditions through the week and near normal temperatures, and the next event would be at the end of the week. It appears that Friday or Friday night, but even that, I'm talking about at this time, it looks like maybe 5 to 8 centimeters. If that changes, of course, as it does, and we get closer to it, I will fine tune everything for you. But that's kind of what we have on the horizon. So we see that system moving out overnight tonight. We get into a lot of sunshine. This is 8 a.m., all right? You notice in eastern Ontario from Kingston to the nation's capital, that's where the cloud deck is. And watch how that kind of backs up through the day. So it does get very close to eastern parts of the GTA into the north of the city as well. You may see some changing sky conditions as the day wears on, but we're getting, towards the end of the day here. This is at 5 p.m. You keep that full sunshine back to southwestern Ontario, but the other thing we'll all be experiencing will be that wind coming from the northwest. And that wind sustained is going to be around 30 to 40 kilometers an hour through the GTA. We may also be seeing some gusts up there to 50 or even 60 kilometers an hour. So there's definitely a wind chill factor into how things are going to be feeling for tomorrow. Looking ahead towards Wednesday, some decent conditions there too. Overnight tonight in pink, you see what it's going to feel like as we push towards tomorrow morning. So that's just something to be aware of. The daytime high tomorrow coming just up to freezing. And then we have a little bit of build in those temperatures through the week, but primarily we're pretty close to seasonal, Kelda.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks so much, Colette. Finally tonight, a very curious and determined little customer wandered into an Australian gas station this weekend.
Hey, oh yeah, okay, I don't know how to get him off, so come on.
The koala was not in a mood to be ignored. He waddled into the shop, then scampered around for about half an hour. Apparently, he didn't find his favorite snack. That would be eucalyptus leaves. But he did make a couple of friends before conservation officers arrived to take him home. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Maribel Tarouk has your next local newscast tomorrow at 6. I will see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Have a great night, everyone.